Okay, we come out in the end of the 50s, and suddenly we have that box blaring into everybody's life. What did that do?
Well, it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. It kept families together. It kept
It
families
sure
home.
did.
And we all gathered around the TV every night on Saturday night, and all the neighbors came in, and we had hot cocoa and cookies and big time.
Did the television bring a real fundamental change in your private life and your public life? Meaning you used to have public, you went out for your entertainment, and
Yeah.
you interacted with your neighbors and everything. When that box comes, why leave?
Well, it did to some extent.
But not right away.
But no. Mainly, I think it cut into business at the theaters. The theaters had a rough time for quite a long time. And I remember we had built a house in 1940, I think it was, up there above where Vaughn's Market is now. The house is still there. And Lloyd Lee and his family lived right next door to us. Well, later then, after the war, when we got our first television set, Lloyd's kids were just little kids. They were probably 5, 7, or 8, something like that. 8, 9. And they wouldn't buy a TV set. And so these little kids would come over and sit in front of water, just like this, down on the ground, legs folded and their arms folded, just watching that TV. And all of a sudden, they'd jump up, especially the little one would jump up and head roll. And we couldn't figure out why until we asked him, and he said he could hear his dad whistling for him.
Oh, wow.
And it's a couple hundred yards away from where we were.
And they weren't supposed to be watching the TV.
Well, they
let them come over.
Yeah, that wasn't the point, but they wanted them home for dinner or for whatever. But those little kids' ears were tuned to Pop's whistle.
And did your boys? I guess the whole country must have been.
But before that,
shocked.
They would sit around it wasn't that big a shock because they would sit around the radio and listen to the Lone Ranger and Superman and
The Shadow.
and just enthralled. And they'd go to bed at night with a radio by the side of their bed and listen and go to sleep, listening to all these cowboy stories and
Long Cassidy.
yeah, all that stuff. So actually the TV wasn't that big a thing.
But technologically, I mean, you've always been kind of a buff with all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I never could figure out how to work them. Most of it didn't work. Just so they worked, that was all. Yeah, we like to have the things
but there was
that were coming along.
Normally there were just special things that we would look at.
Yeah, we never were real TV addicts, like so many people, they
set it on in the morning and let it go all the time. Yeah. We never did do that.
Was there just one channel early on? And
channel was all you could get.
There were a couple of channels in San Diego to
Channel 8.
Start with.
We used to have Harold Keene on for news.
Yes, I remember Harold Keene. I think there were 2 stations. I think they did have a little bit of competition. But there was plenty of room
for expansion.
Yeah.
During that period, I guess, a lot of the middle class, this is all going by my understanding of all this, that the middle class in America is bam, right? Just really expanded quite a bit. And when I think of all the suburbs, when I think of the miles of suburbs, I always picture that as an outgrowth of the 50s prosperity.
Well, maybe so, but you must remember that the automobile didn't really become popular. Well, it was popular, of course, but proliferate, I guess, is the word after 1930.
People could really move around.
Yes, and buy cars. The Fords were $400, and it was made so cheap and so trouble-free, relatively, from the bigger cars, and just everybody then had transportation, and they could move around and go to different places, live a little farther out, not live in the city,
Did California, and especially South Bay area here, just blow up?
No, it really didn't. course, we came here in 27.
It blew pretty good after the
Yeah.
war in the 50s. Carlos
Yeah,
Taveras.
but nothing like what it's done in the last 10 years.
Well, no, not since Eastlake, but where Brad's living now, that was all post-World War II housing.
Well, everybody wants to come to West, you know. There's no severe winters here as there are in the East, and so many people wanted to come West. It was an adventure, among other things, because there were
So many service,
Western stories.
but so many service people had been here.
And service people had been here, and they knew what lovely country it was, you know. And so,
Is that when did the Navy rode during the war itself?
Oh,
and
yeah.
then
I should
yeah.
say so.
perpetuated
Yeah.
itself
Oh,
after
yeah.
that? Did that change the city?
Well, I'm sure it had a big effect on the city, but I don't think it was known as a Navy town. Yes, San Diego was a Navy town.
Post-war?
Yes.
Not pre-war?
No, not pre-war, no. And so in that way, yes, it did change it because,
Well, it was a Navy town pre-war.
yes, the Navy was based here, that's true, honey, but there was not nearly the activity that there was after the war.
No, that's
The war
true.
made it
So all the MCRD and all those bases that you see right up around Harbor Island and all that, that was all post.
No, that was pre-war.
I think that was pre-war. I think that's how they got that prime land. That's very developed,
Yes.
that land in there. You know, now, but the big fields, the big thousands of acres up north, you know, were training areas, and the government just came in, and I don't know how they acquired it, but they got thousands and hundreds of thousands of acres there, and they still have it.
Right.
You mean like Pendleton,
Pendleton,
Miramar.
those were the bases for training, you see, and they named property ever since.
You drive up there now and you hit Oceanside, it stops, and there's nothing for those 17 miles.
Yeah.
And as soon as it stops being marine property at San Onofre and San Clemente, boom, it just starts right up.
Right, and it's San Diego and Los Angeles are just growing together.
Well, when the Navy gets smart and sells that for a lot of money, and it just moves, you can move 20 miles
Gosh, yes.
to the east and have the same
Yeah.
thing. You wouldn't have the landing capabilities, I guess. Boy, you wonder how to bail out the country. Maybe that's the way to do it.
They don't need to be right near the water. As a matter of fact, I think it would be better if they were back a ways.
It's part of their training. There's assault landings. They do a lot of landings
Well, they
there.
could do it too well in Salt Lake.
And
Way
Coronado, the
inland where
amphibious space.
land isn't nearly as valuable as it is here. And maybe someday they'll.
No waves, though.
Hmm?
No waves.
No waves, that's right.
Okay.
The amphibious is something that was during the war too. That was developed.
Yeah,
during
Coronado.
the war.
Yeah,
That's prime property.
Underwater guys.
What was downtown San Diego like?
No high rises. Highest building was the El Cortez.
Because it was on a hill.
Was it a rough downtown, a sailors downtown?
No. You could walk anywhere downtown with no thought of any problem with it, you know. Any place
Lower
downtown.
Broadway was the sailors' part. Lower Broadway down toward the docks.
Yes, but that's where the playing fields were, you know. Playing field was down there.
Yeah, but that's the ship's dock, the Navy boats.
There was a lot of Navy, yes, up Broadway, but nobody that I know of perceived a danger from sailors. They were just guys that were serving their country, you know.
But everyone dressed up to go downtown.
So that was a big thing.
Oh,
Fox
yeah.
was a Fox Theater.
Fox
yeah.
Theater and the Pantages Theater I told you about.
Yeah.
Mansion and Marco. And all the women got dressed up and wore white gloves, and a hat and a coat or a suit.
Mm.
And you were all snorted out. The men wore suits and ties. Pop used to wear a hat. Some do.
Suit was the best. Probably still got it.
You know, downtown when I was growing up there's no reason to go downtown.
Yeah.
San Diego. Spaghetti Factory.
Yeah.
The restaurant.
Yeah, the
That was
restaurant.
good.
Yeah.
But beyond that, until Han got in there and rebuilt, built Gordon Plaza,
Yeah.
there was no reason to go down there. And I don't think any, I know Mom never would have really gone down there for any reason, unless he worked or something.
Well, it was all financial.
Right? And now I went down there a couple nights ago, and I haven't been beyond Horton Plaza in years. The gas lamp rebuilding that's going on is incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. A lot of bars and nightclubs, and they really cleaned it up. They put bars in nightclubs, cleaned the places up.
Well, the theaters used to have releases of their good pictures, mainly in the big cities. So we in Chula Vista, National City, and out the home couldn't see the real good pictures unless we went into San Diego.
Right.
And Marian and I went down to the Fox Theater one time, and
We've been over that.
when did we do
We've
that?
done
All right, never mind.
But those were just movie
Skip that.
theaters, huh?
that. Yeah,
Rewind.
yeah,
Just plain old movie theaters.
yeah.
Wow.
It's amazing how the movie business has changed, though. The first run comes in every town in the country, I think.
On screens that are
Yeah.
as big as that picture
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
And you're in a theater about this big.
Yeah.
And how much does it cost now?
That's $6 or $7.
What is the picture rent?
If you're unlucky, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not really out of line, you see, compared, because we're at least 10 times higher than they were back then. So if a picture show was 60 cents for a first run picture and $6 now, it's the same thing.
We never paid more at the Fox than we did the Seville, did we? We paid, you and I always sat in the low seats of the Seville.
Well, that was 40 cents.
That was before we were married. After we were married, we got the 25 cents thing.
Okay. Travels. Actually, I think I want to go right into the Mihai. Escape from Romania. How do you meet Mihai?
We were parked at a railway station waiting, or a railroad track waiting for the train to come. We were on our way into Bucharest, in Romania, the 2 campers of us. And
Romania was open for tourists.
yeah.
Encouraged?
No.
I don't think they encouraged anybody to come in, but they weren't barred from going in.
And this young man came running back to us while we were waiting for the train. He says, "I see you are Americans. Welcome to my country. What can I do to help you?"
Why were you waiting for the train if you were
Well, the grade crossing was there, the train crossing the road, and I got away for it.
So you're sitting in the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had met some people by the name of Kaiser from Oregon, and they were traveling with us. So we were 2 oddities. And we told him we wanted a campground. He says, "Well, follow me."
This was when? What year?
October 1970. And he wasn't going to let us get away because a couple of miles down the road he stopped. He went zooming ahead of us and
In his car?
and then he stopped and got out and waved to us. We stopped again, and he said, "Follow me and I will take you to the campground." So he was way out on the road to Pulaski oil fields.
And he spoke fine English. And...
Excellent.
Very good English.
Excellent, just as good as he does today. And so he led us to the campground, and we went in, got settled, and he wouldn't leave. He didn't leave. He stayed and stayed and stayed and talked, and he just gushed all this information. He'd been reading smuggled news magazines.
And there's always a guard at the gate of these parks, and the guard came over and spoke to him privately, and he told us later, the guard said, "I can't spend that time in America." He said, "I have to go." Because the guard was going to turn him into the police to come and get him.
See, they weren't having much truck with Americans.
Had Romania been... Had there been a military invasion? There was never any military intervention from the Soviets in Romania, was there?
No,
Not like Czechoslovakia or Hungary.
no, no.
It was just a winking between the Romanian leaders and Russia?
They were not occupied.
Right.
Romania was not occupied, apparently, but they had the most repressive
Right.
communist regime of any of them. And Mihai told us he had to get out of the country, or he would die.
How did he,
Well,
after waving at you and saying, I'll show you a campground, how did he How did he go from that to bearing his heart to you saying,
Very quickly.
We were just Americans, and he wanted to unload all this stuff. And during this time he was with us, we mentioned this before, he told of his arrest.
He told us that the next day.
Was it the next day when he came back? He came back with his wife and his tiny little baby, and told us of how he, as a young boy of 17, was a leader of a group that wanted freedom.
They were university students.
Wanted freedom for their country. You know, they didn't want this subservience to Russia and the authorities on them all the time. And he was arrested and went to court, and because he was only 17 and not 18, he was jailed. The boys 18 and older were shot.
now that was that a secret police action, or it was condemned in a court of law just like you had to deal with a parking ticket?
We don't know what the legal ramifications are. We only know that the authorities apprehended him and questioned him and sent him to prison. And
For 20 years.
For 20 years. And there was a storage. I remember one of the tales he told in the prison yards. They never got enough to eat. The kids that were there in the prison never got enough to eat. They were always starving. But there was a pile of corn, a huge pile of corn, ears of corn, drying on the ground. And if anybody dared take one of those to eat, they'd shoot him. And he was released. Oh yes. He was released because of intervention by an American.
President Johnson.
Oh yes.
They wanted, Romania wanted special concessions from the United States, and President Johnson says, not until you release X number of political prisoners, or all political prisoners, I forget which. But anyway, Namie came under this.
He was one of the beneficiaries of this.
Beneficiaries of this swap.
That made him love the Americans even more.
And this was at the end of 5 years. And when he was released, he went back to school. He was at the University of Bucharest when he was arrested. He went back to school, and he went into computer work. And he told us how terrible it was that the United States was selling IBM machines all over the world, that he was working on, they had IBM machines there in Bucharest, the government had them, and he thought that was wrong. He thought that was terrible, that all of our technology was going to the communist countries.
Free to the continent.
Yeah. You should get to know me.
Well,
He
we don't do the same thing with him.
Well, you can't sit with him for 2 hours. You're going to have to sit with him for several days, because
He's just so
he has such a stupendous amount of information. You can't believe, and it gushes.
Yeah.
It just gushes. And he knew everything about President Kennedy, Eisenhower, Johnson. He knew all of our history. He knew everything that had been going on in World War II, everything that had been going on in the 50s and the 60s. He was up on everything. And he speaks all these languages. And I asked him how come he speaks so well. And he said his parents hired an English-speaking tutor, Namie. And they kept this English-speaking Namie until he could speak perfect English. Then they got a Frenchman. Then they got a German one. And then they had an Italian.
Was he from a privileged family then?
His father was a professor of economics at the University of Bucharest. And then when they became this hardcore communist country, the father was kicked out of the university and put to work in a local energy, electric, keeping books doing some shutaway, you know.
They had an apartment right in the center of Bucharest. We visited them, or I did.
I was there, yeah.
Visited them in this apartment on the 7th floor, I think it was, and you can lean out the window in the center of Bucharest. It's about 3 blocks away.
It was an old apartment house, old, but the house, and their apartment was very elegant, had been elegant, but it was shabby. Needed paint, needed new furniture, needed draperies, everything. It was just very shabby, very sad. And everything was very drab and sick.
Well,
sick.
we could speak for hours about Mihai and what he's done since he got out and came to this country, but I probably have a dozen different letters from him while he was still in Bucharest of schemes to get him out of the country. One of them was to send him complete diving equipment because he was going to swim under the Danube River.
And he can't even swim. He don't know how to swim.
But he had just fantastic ideas about how he was going to get out. He wanted $25,000 to buy a specially built automobile that was built in Switzerland that had a space under the back seat for a man to lie down in and be smuggled out. I wanted us to buy one of those for him to be smuggled out of the country.
Was he just impressing upon you your responsibility as human beings to save him?
I don't think...
you see what I'm getting at? Was he saying that if you
no.
do not act, I am going to die or my family?
No, I never got that impression. He was... there was never any bashfulness about his asking for our help. But there was no recrimination of any kind or any lightning bolt going to hit us if we didn't do it. He appreciated what we had already done and always has, and has been our friend. He called me a couple of days ago.
I talked to them last night. But they call us aunt and uncle now.
Yeah.
And that started with the correspondence because he tried to, you see, all of our letters were open. All mail between us had been censored. And
we soon became Uncle Dick and Aunt Marian.
He was trying to make us part of his family, you see, for the Romanian connection.
Right.
So if he could make them believe that he had an aunt and uncle in California, then he thought maybe his chances of getting out would be that much better. But also, he impressed upon us when we were there to keep the letters coming, because that meant that the eyes of the West were on him.
Sure.
And he was
He's a very smart dude. You know, he's high up in the Wells Fargo Bank now. Really funny.
and Ross Perot, you know who Ross Perot is.
Sure. Give him a job.
Give him a job.
ABC.
Yeah.
What that company was called?
Yeah. EDS.
EDS, American Data System.
Electronic data system.
We've got about 6 minutes on that. Do we have another tape?
I don't think so. I bought just 3 tapes, and I think Laurie's got the other one. Want to be continued in our next? I should have bought some. I intended to buy some when I was down there today, and I just plumb forgot about it.
Well, anyway,
We're just getting started.
I know, because I wanted to go work on the Mihai.
Oh, that's the story all by itself, is it?
That really is a story, and it's going to be a continuing story to carry them clear through and carry her clear through too, because she's leading a flamboyant life now.
You're talking about the baby.
About
the
Andrea.
tiny little baby
Yeah,
that we saw a year old.
Yeah, when we first saw her, she was just a year old, and now she's 24. She's married to an Italian businessman, and she comes back to California about 3 or 4 times a year. She's just graduated with a Bachelor of Science from the American University in Lugano, and she studied both there and in Geneva. She had an offer of a job from one of the biggest banks in Switzerland, but now she thinks she's going to go as of last night. she thinks she's going to go to Barclays Bank. She's going to go to Rome and get her master's at the Boston University campus in Rome.
Wow.
And then she will go in international investments with Barclays Bank. Now she speaks the same number of languages that her father speaks. And Mihai also speaks Russian.
Mihai also has his folks and her folks. There's 6 of them live in the house that he bought up in
Yeah, they brought his mother and father over and her mother and father because Mihai and Anka are only children. They have no other relatives to look after their aging parents. So they have brought them both over here and they're all living in one house. Kind of spooky.
Okay, here we are looking into the video. Those very strange worlds hidden inside the video camera. Backlight. Okay, we're shooting a test strip right now. And hopefully if everything works right, I can be able to pop the,
Not pop the moon?
nope. You don't need to hook up another.
Okay.
Don't worry about that. I've tried doing it. That's a pain in the rear.
Put
But
those together?
yeah, putting those cables, clamping on the wall.
I didn't try to do a clamping machine on
I think the clamping machine is what does it. But I'm taping right now just to make sure that it's going onto the big tape. And I'm going to pop it in yours. And
Be sure you get yourself in, one.
yeah,
No,
I've moved it. Yeah, I've moved it back quite a bit.
It's not completely level. Never got, get yourself isn't level. It's,
Really? Oh yeah, it is a little off.
Yeah, well, a little more. I think that's closer. It still doesn't look level to me.
There we go. That's about right. Got the back of the couch. Okay, let's see what happened here. Okay.
Got your questions?
All right. Is that red light
Can't even see it.
on? It's on. Okay.
I see it with the glasses, but I can't see it at all.
Number 3 of the interviews. 3rd hour. Hopefully, I think we'll get it done in an hour this time. But what we closed up with right at the end of the last one was the whole Mihai adventure. And what I wanted to get out and talk about was the whole, not just meeting him initially. I think at the very end of the last tape we had him kind of flagging you into a trailer park or something. But what happened after that with a lot of the work with Uncle Bob and a lot of the actual, I don't know if it was paperwork or stuff that wasn't quite on the level, government-wise, or what happened?
Nothing was not on the level, nothing. The main obstacle we had was trying to convince him, Uncle Bob,
Right.
that he was worthy, that Mihai was worthy. He just dismissed what we said about it.
We've seen so much
He had seen
of this problem, and it was new to us. And it happened that we had a genuine article. We had something that was really working for you.
So once Mihai found out through your discussions that your brother was a congressman, he
Yes.
must have.
Well, we
gotten
found out accidentally,
That was
We
that.
had,
We had a friend from here, a dentist, who wanted to go and learn about this, and so he wanted to go and see Mihai in Romania. So we gave him the address and so on. So Joe went over with his wife, and they looked him up. And Mihai, of course, as he always did, went into his spiel because he was so deadly serious. This was the most important thing in the world to him. And he immediately started telling Joe, and Joe said, "Gee, if you only knew a congressman or something." I mean, Joe didn't say that, but he said.
Mihai said that.
Yeah, Mihai said, I'm sorry. Mihai says, if I only knew a congressman or a senator or somebody, they could help me. And Joe says, oh, Dick's brother's a congressman.
And have you tried to keep that?
We had never said a word about it.
No,
We didn't think we could do anything.
Right.
You see, because we knew from here that there are thousands of people in exactly that situation that wanted to get out.
and it was
And
such a
it was
repressive,
impossible.
such a repressive regime that they weren't allowing people to leave their own country.
So that obviously wasn't policy for congressmen or senators to be able to sponsor political
No,
Definitely.
dissidents.
but
It was
then,
purely accidental.
but then Bob,
Then Bob took hold of it.
Bob, some of his colleagues, you see, all the time Romania was trying to become a most favored nation
Right.
for trade,
Sure.
and some of his colleagues made a trip into Eastern Europe, and they went to Bucharest. And just as an aside, Bob said, my brother knows this guy, and gave him his address. He said, look him up and see what his story is.
So Mihai, after he found out about Bob Wilson, did he contact you then
Oh, yeah.
and said, please tell Bob?
We must have a dozen letters of all the schemes that he had of getting out. And he told about these people that Marian started to talk about, that Bob was urging to see this man, Mihai. And some of them did, and they got interested in him.
Well, there was a representative named Durinski who was ethnic background. I think he was Hungarian or Bulgarian or something, from his parents from the Middle East.
I think he was from Chicago, isn't he?
Yeah, he was in Chicago, but his parents had
Middle
immigrated.
East to me.
Yeah,
That's right.
but his parents had emigrated to the United States. So he had a background, and he was very impressed with Mihai and with Mihai's story, and recognized the plight of the country.